Hello, I'm Kim Denyes. I'm a spiritual director in Easton, Pennsylvania. And I am here today to talk about the book of Job. It's one of the Hebrew Bible books, and it is a book that contains some mysteries, some one-offs that we don't see in any other part of the Old Testament, any part of the canon. And so I want to start with kind of asking the question, because this is the central question of Job, is who does deserve to suffer? And then the follow-up is maybe who does suffer? And Job's going to say that we all are born to suffering. And if you've lived very long, probably you have found that to be true, that you have had suffering come your direction. The book of Job in this sequence is following right after Genesis. So we are right about 2,000 years before the birth of Christ. And this is actually when the book of Job happens. It's where it's been dated. I want to just talk about a few of the things that we don't see anywhere else but in Job. The first is that there is no mention of Judaism, of being an Israelite or not an Israelite, and yet all the characters that we're going to see, the three men in Job, they're all monotheists. That means they believe in one God. Monotheist is that word. Mono meaning one, theist being God. And then there is this unique scene that we're going to see very early on, where the heavenly beings come to present themselves before the Lord. And Satan is part of that. He makes a showing. It's almost like we're looking behind the curtain, if you would. The other thing, there's no priests in this story, and yet Job, similar to Abraham, they have a means of doing sacrifices. In Job, we know it's a burnt offering. And we're going to find out as we head into Exodus that God really likes the smell of burnt meat. That's kind of odd, right? I don't think of God in those terms, but this idea of a burnt offering is what we see with Job. The reader has a really front row seat to some information that Job nor his friends have, okay? So we're going to see God enter into a deal, if you will, a wager with the enemy, with Satan, around Job's righteousness. We don't see that anywhere else. And in the first two chapters, I think for our modern sense of life, God appears a little overly confident in Job, but yet he must have known, God must have known the heart of Job, that Job is going to stay righteous. Another thing that we see in this book is that his friends are of no comfort to him. And I just want to give you a little spoiler alert that his friends are actually going to be not quite condemned, but they're going to be censored by the Lord. God is going to say, they didn't speak my words. And they don't offer comfort to Job. One of the things I love about Job is he so clearly stays with what he believes about his life. He just absolutely knows that he has not sinned, and that's what his friends are going to try to accuse him of. And I want to also name that without the book of Job, this book is vital to our central understanding of who is God and how suffering is not necessarily from God. I know some of us may believe that God sends suffering. That might be for another topic, whether God does or not. I like to believe that what comes in my life, God is so efficient that God uses for his honor and his glory and for bringing me closer to him. But because of this story and this book, we get to kind of see the status quo, and the status quo was if you lived right, then you were rich, you were blessed. If you didn't live right, if you sinned and lived evil, then you were punished. That was the central understanding of how that worked in that time period. But God, with the enemy's, if you will, help, it kind of gets blown up. This idea that that's how God works gets really beautifully blown up. So let's jump into the story. Again, 2,000 years before Christ, so about the same period that we are from the birth of Christ right now. So the story is about Job, and it says that there was once a man named Job. I was going to pull that right from the text, and because it's got an interesting kind of language. Oh, how wonderful. I opened my Bible right to it. It says, there was once a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. That characteristics has a very strong tie into oral tradition. It's not terribly dissimilar from kind of once upon a time. We don't really name the time. There was once a man named. And so that's what we're looking at. And this man is beautifully righteous. He is righteous in every way of his life, and he's also wealthy. And the book says that he is the richest man in the East. He has perfect integrity. He fears God and avoids evil. That's kind of the sum of Job. And then he has 7 sons and 3 daughters. He has 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 ox, and 500 donkeys. So there's what we know about Job. Then we go behind the scenes where not everyone, of course, but many are gathered to come before the Lord. And Satan comes as part of this to present himself to the Lord. That's why they're there. They're presenting themselves to the Lord. And as casual as can be from the text, God says to Satan, "Where have you come from?" And the answer is, from going to and from on the earth and from walking up and down on it. And casually, God brings up Job. "Have you considered my servant Job?" And Satan begins to spout that Job doesn't fear God for nothing. Job is in this for what he can get out of it. My words, not what Satan says. But Satan names that God has put a fence around Job. Now that's interesting language because our Jewish brothers and sisters see the law. We've not gotten there yet. This is pre-law. We're way before the Jewish law coming down. But they can view the law as being a fence around them. So kind of that same language we hear. And basically Satan says, he doesn't serve you because he loves you. He serves you because you give him good things. And God says, very well. He's in your power. Only don't touch him. So there's a sense that he's not to touch his physical being. So in what I call round 1 with Satan, because Satan's going to go back to God, he begins to destroy things in Job's life. And he loses in just what sounds like a moment, we're not sure about time, everything's gone. His children, his beloved children are gone. His property, his servants, his animals, all that's gone. And his response from this, and I kind of like to use some of our language today, we call that act of trauma, where Job would have been. He begins to mourn by doing a physical reaction to it. And we are finding through studies and science that when trauma comes, if we can react to it physically by humming or stomping our feet or doing some physical movement, we can get through our trauma a little bit easier. And I see this with Job. What does he do? He tears his clothing. He rips it apart. He shaves his head. And then he falls on the ground and worships. I find that fabulous in a way because I was raised with an understanding that I can go to God and kneel before God. I can lay out before God on my face. I can sit in a chair and pray. And we see this kind of movement in Job. And he says, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. We know in these few verses after losing everything, verse 22 of the first chapter, that Job does not sin or charge God with this wrongdoing. And this is a shift in the plates, if you will, in the tectonic plates of God and man. How we understood God is changing right there. Round 2, we see Satan and God back having a conversation, and we get a little bit more information about Job. Again, God brings him up ever so casually. And God adds that there's no one on earth as righteous as Job. No one is upright. He fears God. He turns away from evil. He still loves me and serves me, even though you've tried to destroy him for no reason. God adds that. You've tried to destroy him for no reason. Satan then asks or says, skin for skin. In other words, let me touch his body, because he's not going to serve you from that. He's going to curse you to your face. The Lord agrees to it, says, very well, he's in your power, but you cannot kill him. So Satan goes out from the presence of the Lord and inflicts Job with loathsome sores on his body, from the top of his head to the sole of his foot, everywhere. And it's immediately, we don't, in this time period, we did not understand a lot about skin sores, and they were something that puts you outside of the community. And that's what I see here, is that the very thing Job could have benefited from, community, from people that could have loved and listened, he separated from them. And I would even dare say the level of pain that Job has experienced with the grief of his children, with the loss of all of his material things, that he is in a place that's just crushing. He's like beyond words here. I love a line that I read years ago by Joyce Landorf Heatherly. She said that pain is the great leveler. And it is. It gets us out of all kinds of our head and puts us right into life, right in the moment, right? And it does it, I think, for all of us in a very kind of a similar fashion. Job is sitting in his poverty and with his sores, and his wife, who I think gets such a bad rap, but I love how it is in my Bible. I use the HarperCollins Study Bible, New Revised Standard. His wife kind of encourages him to release life and die. Now it's interesting. I like to read my footnotes in the Bible, and this is a great one to take a peek at. The verse where Job's wife says, "Curse God." It actually, in my Bible, it has a little footnote where the Hebrew is it's quite vague, and it actually could be "bless God and die." Now I've heard sermons preached against Job's wife and her "curse God," but I've not heard any on "bless God." I think "bless" fits better who Job is and who they may have been as a couple spiritually. That, especially when we hear him say, God gave it, God took it, blessed be the name of the Lord. I hope his wife was walking kind of in that, and we have no reason to think otherwise, that they were perhaps a nice partnership spiritually. But Job asks her a question, and it's a question that we perhaps all can ask even yet today, is shall we only receive good from the hand of the Lord and not receive the bad? I think often on that verse and wonder what the bad is that I receive from God. One day when I was sitting with it, the thought came to me that when I was little, my parents took me to the doctor and allowed the doctor to inject bacteria into my system. We call that vaccinations. They're viewed as, by most people, as appropriate. I know some people don't agree with that. I had them as a child, and if you just stripped it down and looked at a parent taking their child to somebody else and letting them poison that child, if you will, it seems a little bit odd. But parents had their eye on the longer view, that at some point I'd be in school and at some point I'd be exposed to other children, and there was a way to prevent these diseases that could be very life-altering. I guess we could say that's kind of what, some of that might happen in our spiritual lives, that things can come that maybe feel like a bit like an injection. But as the years go by, we look back and think, if I had not walked in that moment, I wouldn't know how to do this moment. And I do see that as part of God's invitation for us to transform, for us to move from a place of just knowing about God to living with God. I think that's exactly what we see here with Job. So I'm going to end there. Job, the next part will be his 3 friends show up. But for right now, he's sitting on an ash heap, scraping his wounds with a piece of pottery. And his wife has either said, bless God or curse God, but let go. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you're enjoying these journeys into these ancient words that still mold and shape us. Jump into the next one. It's going to be posted at the same time. If you like this or wish to subscribe, that'd be lovely. Again, thank you so much.